when you and I were planting, this stuff was kind of starting, but man, it's really, it's almost like if you don't want to be in some kind of cohort or be in some kind of relational network, it's because you don't want to be rather than you can't find one.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I was dying to find those things when we were planting and 09, those early days. I think, I heard somebody say every pastor needs a counselor, a coach, a pastor, and a friend. And I think that's so true. Like having a counselor, somebody's going to help me look a little deeper. Having a coach, somebody's going to help me set some goals, reach those goals. A pastor, somebody's going to speak into me and from my spiritual vitality, give me the truth of God's word. And then somebody also that can just be a friend and that I can sit with and be vulnerable with. And I think all those are so critical in those relationships so that we don't stay in that space of isolation.
Hey guys, welcome to Breaking Barriers. My name is Pastor Andrew, and I had a chance to sit down with a counselor and former pastor of a church plant, 15 years right here in North Carolina, Ben Tugwell. And we had an opportunity to really talk about how, as pastors, we process some of the harder parts of ministry. We jumped into this conversation last week. We're going to jump back into it today. Thanks. So I think part of what we're trying to do at Breaking Barriers when it comes to young guys or pastoral health, especially in growing churches, is, make sure that we're the type of guys that if we're going to run into the building, we know we can already do 100 push-ups. We're already sort of, we're working on that part of our life. And I think a part of that is physical health. A part of that is, it's all the stuff. It's the flywheel. It's finances and physical health and all that kind of stuff. But some of it is just the straight up realizing what the emotional dangers are.
Absolutely.
And trying to be able to see them coming a long way off. I'm a big advocate of that. We have to know the wiles of the devil if we're going to stand against them, And so we see them a long way off. Now, you have talked about this in 3 buckets when you're talking to our staff about it. I'd love for us to maybe spend some time just talking about this, and it gives guys good handles, when we're thinking about, man, these are three danger points, I guess, that you need to be ready for.
Right.
We've already mentioned the first one, but let's go back through it. The first one is just thinking about relationships, like how can those relationships be dangerous? How can they layer up pain? And how, what do we need to do about it?
Yeah, great question. And I would say like the goal of why these 3, when we think about the relationships, responsibilities, reality, it's very much what your analogy was. Like the analogy you just named was, I want leaders to grow in capacity. And how do we grow? How do we build that muscle so that we can take on the demands of pastoral ministry? And I love the work of John Townsend and Henry Cloud. They have a book called Integrity, interestingly enough. And in the book, they say that character is a set of capacities to meet the demands of reality. So pastoral ministry, you go into it and you're like, well, I could be a pastor of a church planter of a church plant of 100. Okay, what about the internal work that you need to do, not just the systems and structures to get to 200 or 300, but like what's the demands of reality that your character would need to get to 200 or 300 or 1,000. Right. And this is where you see a lot of pastors fall off, disqualifications happen, because their character never grew to those demands of reality. Mm-hmm. The new challenges of like, I can navigate one negative experience with a couple that I was trying to help in marriage counseling and it didn't go well. Okay, can I navigate 10? Can I navigate 20 over time? And those are demands of reality. So what's the character that would need to be developed? And so that's why we talk about those 3: relationships, responsibilities, and realities, because it's like, how do we grow in those areas of our character to be able to take on those new challenges that will inevitably happen
in those 3 specific areas.
In those specific areas, right? That will inevitably happen if your church is growing and going, right?
Right, exactly.
So relationship,
which is, in my opinion, and you know this because you guys were there. I know this, which is a big time myth in the non-church growing world. A lot of times, what I hear is, well, if my church was ever 500, then I would have the space, the time, the money.
Yeah,
man, if our church, if our church ever hit 1,000, we would have so much extra margin of money, time. And what people don't realize is like it is the opposite.
Yeah.
As the church grows, it only gets more demanding. the problems only get bigger.
Yep.
At least they feel that way. I mean, you're talking about more dollars and cents, more people's lives, that kind of thing. And so what you're saying is exactly right. Like, you can't wait around to say, well, my character is not going to need to be in a bigger place there because I'll have more resources. That's really not true.
No, not at all.
So it's like we have to be building the capacity in those areas of relationship, responsibility, and reality now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes God in his goodness will give us wake-up calls to pay attention to those characters. Yeah. So maybe it is a stopping of your church to grow numerically so that you can pay attention to those things.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's growing and you're exhausted and you don't know why. Let that be a wake-up call to say, maybe I should look at these three things. So here's the three. Here's the first one of the three, and you kind of set me up for that, is relationships. Relationships is not just about community groups. I know we push that this time of year. It's the fall, right? We're going to say, be in a group, you can't do life alone. But I would even say it's even more than that of what does it look like to be vulnerable with somebody else? What does it look like for others to have access to our hearts? Like, to be able to say, to name our emotions, to be able to express those, and to be the way my coach always tells me is like, vulnerability is childlike. Who can I be childlike with? Well, I don't have to wear the mask. Mm-hmm. And they get to see me for, really what's going on. And I think that is so helpful and important for leaders to have. I talked about this with your staff. I was in a process group when I was trying to grow and kind of in this journey for myself. And I remember being in this process group with all these different leaders. I was the only pastor in the group. And this one leader was going through a hard time. And I just began to kind of pastor them as I would, like, here's the right scripture, here's the right, and somebody in the group said, hey, Ben, we don't need you to be the pastor right now. We really want to know Ben as just you, as the dad, the husband. Right. Like, who are, that was so freeing for me because it was like allowed me to like, okay, I don't have to perform for this. I can just be Ben and be cared for as Ben. And I think that is so helpful for a pastor to have those comrades in their life that they can be vulnerable with. Mm-hmm. Because without that, we can get really, and the number one challenge, Andrew, is like when I am coaching pastors is isolation. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, if they know that I'm struggling with this, and they're going to think I'm weak. If they know that I'm struggling with this, they're going to think I am disqualified. Or they know I'm struggling with this, and and I think like if we can get out of that narrative of like, no, people actually will trust you probably more if you're more vulnerable. Mm-hmm. They'll probably say, oh, I can relate to that guy now because he doesn't have it all figured out, and hey, I certainly don't either. And I'm not saying being reckless with it. I'm not saying get up there. Some pastors do it in a way that I would call vulnerability, where they get up and they are sharing a story just for like, that kind of manipulation point. But I would say, finding some people in your life that you can be that with and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. I mean, we just came out of a hard week, and I know many of y'all who are pastoring right now, it's hard to navigate with the church when you have different big news things. Everybody wants to know, what do you think of it? I think it's a good question to like kind of do what Paul tells the Ephesian elders, like, hey, pay attention to yourself and the flock that the Holy Spirit's made you an overseer. What does it look like to pay attention to yourself? And what does it look like to like not just let you and the Lord, like you communicate and commune with the Lord on that, but like what does it look like to let somebody else in?
Man, in your opinion, is there sort of a connection in these three areas that you see from your coaching? And there are three needs we have because they're also three pain points. Like you mentioned, like a pastor, they may turn over 7 to 10 really good friends in a course of 3 or 4 years. Somebody else does that in a lifetime. Yeah. And there's a connection there between that's probably one of the pain points. So therefore it's one of the things that we need to be looking at. Yeah. I don't know if that theme would go through with responsibilities and realities also.
Yeah, it would. Like specifically with friendships, like a lot of times pastors, they will experience that first wave of hurt or that first wave of betrayal or whatever it is. And maybe that keeps them from doing the very thing that God's created them to do, which is to have those relationships, because they just start going, well, I can't trust anybody. I can't let anybody in now. And so we kind of believe that lie, and we live in that hidden sort of, and freedom exists in the light, not in the darkness. Right. And so if we can let some more people in and allow those healthy relationships to thrive. And it may not have to be in your church. It might be some friends outside, whatever, but finding those, I think, is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think that we have to also understand. I mean, you're in Greenville, so you know this just as well as I do. I mean, there are a lot of dysfunctional churches.
Yes.
Super dysfunctional.
Yeah.
You know, where pastor says, "Hey man, I'm dealing with depression," and might get fired.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
or hey man, I need some friends so I can confess things, and the second he confesses it, they run to the deacon board. I mean, it's like, man, that does happen.
Yes.
More than we would like to admit. And so, maybe just my 2 cents is like, maybe there needs to be a starting place for guys that might be in this situation of them. We're like, if a guy's in the very front end of saying, man, we are in a dysfunctional, backward church that I feel like God's brought me here to turn, then maybe we need to have some of those relationships outside of that church.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a lot of opportunities for that right now. I mean, we're now, when you and I were planting, this stuff was kind of starting, but man, it's really, it's almost like if you don't want to be in some kind of cohort or be in some kind of relational network, it's because you don't want to be rather than you can't find one.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when I was dying to find those things when we were planting and 2009, those early days. I think, I heard somebody say every pastor needs a counselor, a coach, a pastor, and a friend. And I think that's so true. Like having a counselor, somebody's going to help me look a little deeper. Having a coach, somebody's going to help me set some goals, reach those goals. A pastor, somebody's going to speak into me and from my spiritual vitality, give me the truth of God's word. And then somebody also that can just be a friend and that I can sit with and be vulnerable with. And I think all those are so critical in those relationships so that we don't stay in that space of isolation.
So let's talk about responsibilities. So when you move on and think about responsibilities, what's your, what are you thinking about there?
Yeah. So just like relationships, one of the first things we learn in relationships is attachment. That's 0 to 2 years old. That's when the first things you begin to learn as a human being is attachment. How do I connect with other people? When we think about responsibilities, we start learning that from 2 to 3 in our inner work, like when we're growing and developing. And I can think back to the time my youngest son, Gideon, was cleaning up blocks when he was 3 years old. My wife walked in the room and kind of was looking over his shoulder, and he stood up and he put his hands on his hip and said, "I don't need to be supervised." And people call that the terrible 2s and 3s. And there's a reason why we do that. Is we're learning like what's our responsibility? Where's my voice? When do I stand up? Who's in charge of me? Who am I in charge of? That's when we start to grow and develop. And so if we don't have those really early, it's really hard to get those later until we can kind of grow and understand our responsibilities. So I'll just be completely honest. When you named that tightrope and you talked about the responsibility of preaching.
And just if I can, just to go back. Like the tightrope, just if people haven't heard.
Sorry,
No, the tightrope is the idea of like, man, let's say you preach a sermon 30 or 40 minutes. And you're actually physically walking. So like we've talked about, like, man, a lot of times a sermon, you might walk half a mile or a mile, 3/4 of a mile if you just look at your Fitbit, or a mile even, but or even sometimes longer. If it's like a 50-minute sermon, you can get well over a mile. So, but you're doing it like somebody who's doing it on a tightrope. Because it takes that amount of focus and mental burn.
It does, yes.
With you got all these eyes on you. You're trying to remember everything. It's not like a walk in the park. It's a walk on a tightrope. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. And so that tightrope, you come off the stage and then you're walking in the lobby and you're trying to navigate these relational things. Well, for me, like, I was a people pleaser in my earlier days and a recovering people pleaser now. Yeah. And so, if I am walking through a lobby and I see, man, a face that maybe looks upset, I'm like, oh, it's something I said. And I need to go make that right or whatever. It's probably that one thing that's in my head that was or, oh, there's a small group leader that's not liked how we rolled out our plan this year, and I need to make that right. So all that's also a tightrope. That's also causing my heartbeat to come up. And I think what's helped me navigate that is, well, you could just say, well, Ben, get over it. You're just being whatever. But like, I would say what's helped me navigate that has been, and naming what is it that I'm responsible for. I'm not responsible for how that guy feels about this. And I need to trust that he can be an adult and come to me, talk to me about it. Because if I keep doing this, man, I'm going to be exhausted at the end of the day, which is what caused a lot of exhaustion in my earlier ministry days. And so you could put me in every church planting, pastoral health conference, that said the importance of taking a sabbatical, the importance of going on a date with my wife, the importance of eating healthy and working out and putting my phone away at a certain time. And I did all that. I honestly did all those things pretty well. But that doesn't make, just because I turn my phone off at a certain time, and I think those are really important practices, right? But just because I turn my phone off at a certain time doesn't mean I'm not still editing a conversation I had earlier that I feel bad about, or I'm like, I wish I didn't say that, or I should say this, or I should have apologized to you. It's all that kind of stuff that's going on. And so when I think about boundaries and responsibilities, those are the boundaries I'm talking about. Like, how do I have those internal boundaries where I'm thinking about, man, what is my responsibility? Well, the scriptures would tell me to guard my heart because everything I do flows from it. And boundaries is a property line. And when I know what's in my yard, what's my responsibility, man, if I can manage that, and then everything else is like, okay, how then do I serve people? But I'm not responsible for this person's had a tough marriage. They're coming to me. I can shepherd them and love them, but I'm not living there, right?
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for all of what happens next. Right. I can do my very best to care for them and love them. I always fascinated by Jesus and the way he communicates. I mean, I remember going through John with a brand new believer, and he was like, man, if I didn't know better, Jesus seems like kind of rude at times. He was like just kind of shocked at how Jesus was so definite on what he was doing. Like times he'd be away and he never explained why. And the disciples were like, where were you? He's like, I was alone with my Father, right? You think of feeding 5,000, everybody's looking for Jesus. He just takes a boat ride and goes across the sea, and they look for him, and he's like, yeah, I was just talking to the Father. It's like he's just so sure of who he is and as a people pleaser. I'm like, oh my gosh, he should explain himself more or something like that.
Yeah.
But he didn't. He was clear on those boundaries, and I think that's a really important step to take. I think for capacity.
Man, it's so true, Ben. I think of the three things that you talked about, that one really hit me the most because you can really play it out.
Yeah.
Someone says to you, hey, are you guys free Friday to come over for dinner? You don't have the energy for that. What do? We don't just say, sorry, we're not able to do that. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
That's not what we do.
Yeah.
We say, sorry, we're not able to do it. And then we have this mental somersault of like, how do I create an excuse so that they don't feel bad because I don't want them to think that I'm too good, or I don't want them to think that we're too busy for them. And now you've gotten off of your property.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because what my responsibility is to be very truthful with them. Hey, thank you. I'm really honored by that. We're not coming.
Yeah.
And I've done my responsibility.
Yeah, that's it.
But instead, I have taken on a more responsibility to say, and I'm responsible for how they all feel about it.
That's it.
Even though I'm not being rude, I'm not dishonoring God with my response.
Exactly.
And I'm not even giving a word. I'm not even doing the Proverbs thing. Like I'm not even giving like a harsh word or something.
Yeah.
It's not even a word that's not in due time.
Exactly.
It's just I feel the responsibility that they aren't hurt by it.
Yeah.
I think another good example for pastors is, if you've ever written a 1-paragraph email that took you more than about 7 minutes to write.
Yeah.
Right? How many times do we do that?
Yeah.
We sit there and write one email for 45 minutes.
Just so you know, I'm trying to...
we'll read it, write it, erase it, write it, erase it, write it, erase it.
ChatGPT, a better response.
Yeah. But the idea by that is, like, no, my responsibility is to let this person know what the next steps are.
Yeah. My
responsibility is not to let them know and then, be worried to death that it doesn't suit them or something like that. And I'm not making... I mean, guys, if there's something contentious, don't email about it. But you know what I'm getting at, right? And I just think that's really important. Like a lot of our angst just simply comes from us taking things on that are not our responsibility. Yeah. I remember when I had, the assistant that I had before, she was so awesome. She's on the mission field now. And man, just love her in terms of her, she was kind of raised here. So special to me and my wife and also a lot of our staff here. But there would be times when I'm like, I would walk by and be like, hey, what are you doing? And it was something, she just loved it. She wanted to be in. And I'm like, hey, is that part of what we're really supposed to be doing, or
Right,
is it just something that you know? And it was all in obviously good nature, but it was like, man, without boundary lines, people drop stuff off at her desk, and she's gonna just start working on it because that's who she is. We got to have those boundaries so that we can keep, you know, a proper kind of weight and perspective on what we're called to do.
Yeah, well said. I love the word. John Townsend says there's the 5 most important words when it comes to boundaries is that doesn't work for me. Yeah. And so if you get in the habit of saying that, I know, oh my gosh, I've taught leaders before that I've shared that, and they're like, oh my gosh, it sounds so mean. I was like, but is it? Is it mean to say that doesn't work for me? Hey, we want to hang out with y'all Friday. Hey, thank you so much for inviting us, but Friday doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
And anytime you're dealing with somebody that's like, well, what's going on with you? You're dealing with somebody who's already pushing your boundaries. Most likely, they're already pushing your boundaries. Well, what do you have going on? They're already pushing your boundaries. If you say, hey, this isn't work for me. That's what it looks like to set those boundaries. So I think that's so important.
I was this is a good example of this last couple weeks. So we have a book coming out, Chosen. It's an adoption book. Really excited about it. Just kind of our story, our church's story, awesome. And then also just like real practical. You know, it's a book that's supposed to just kind of really be like, man, very easy to take 8 people and say, hey, let's read a chapter a week for 6 weeks or 7 weeks or a couple chapters, and then just a good primer for adoption, right? And so, you know, I'm at that phase where I've never done this before. I'm at that phase where I'm getting guys from around the country that I know to like write a little endorsement for it or whatever. And I sent one to a guy who I have a good relationship with, but it's kind of from way back.
Okay.
And now like his profile has exploded. Okay, like he's a very popular influencer now. I mean, to the glory of God, honestly, I think he's doing a good job with it. But it was so he did exactly the right thing with what we're talking about. I sent him the email. I mean, and this is like one of these guys you got to have a bat line to get to.
Okay.
So, but he wanted me to get it to him. I get it to him. Sends me the most gracious 4 or 5 sentence email back. Man, I hate that I can't do this. I had a previous experience where I have to read a book before I say anything about it. And he's like, man, I'm sure it's great, but I don't have the bandwidth to do this. I hate it, but thank you, for thinking about me. And maybe next time. And it was like, hey man, I feel like it was, he was able to just kind of say like, hey, right now, that's not on my property.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love you though. I'm not mad, and I'm honored that you would ask me. And I feel like he was almost trying to, he really communicated an honoring way back to me.
Yeah.
But what he was doing was what we're talking about. That's not on my property right now.
Yeah.
And I can't do that.
There's so much time and energy in that explanation. And I'm not saying we just need to be cold and calculated, but just clear of like, no, this doesn't work.
Yeah, 3 or 4 sentences and he made it not cold and also was able to clearly communicate, I can't do this.
Yeah. And I think even within
and I appreciated it.
Yeah, I think even with that internal work too, when you're just like at home and you're editing those conversations, like, oh, well, is that my responsibility? That kind of like internal, like what does those personal boundaries look like in my own heart?
Yeah. Well, let's round this out, man. Let's talk about realities.
Yeah.
Sometimes the realities of things are just what they are, but we still need to kind of think about those things in terms of what we're taking on emotionally.
Yeah. The word I use in coaching and we talk about, I'm a Townsend leadership coach. So I work with Dr. John Townsend. And so we talk about integration. Integration is how well we can hold good and negative together.
Okay.
And so this kind of goes back to when I think back to the COVID years of being like on a podcast or a Zoom call with different pastors talking about how we all feeling about it. And I just remember those days, like some were just like rainbows and unicorns, like the Lego song, like everything is awesome. They weren't looking at any negative part of what was going on. They weren't looking at like, no, it really is kind of terrible to like preach in front of a camera and have no one in the room.
Right.
That's hard. And it's really hard to navigate all these different opinions and things like that. And so they just wanted, it was like, no, it's great. We're gonna strengthen our live stream, reach millions more people. It's just all good. And the other pastors were like, man, this is the worst. They weren't looking at any possible positive outcome of this. And so some were holding it all good. Some were holding it all bad. And I think the danger of that is, man, that's just not the world we live in. We live in a world where Christ is risen, but we still live in the world that creation groans at his second coming, right? So we we have to hold space of positive and negative. And I think when I find leaders that can be sort of stuck, emotionless maybe, or maybe they're real critical of themselves, maybe they're critical of their team, perfectionistic, I'm typically looking for, it's probably something there where they haven't allowed themselves to deal with some negative realities that happen because you're just a leader. And I think we all have to have a template of what that looks like in our life for healthy, manageable growth. Because this is a great church. I mean, you guys have had incredible wins. You've had multiple campuses. This is a beautiful building that we're in, but you've also had losses.
Oh, yeah.
And so celebrate those wins, but also like, what is it like to look at the losses as well? That's integration. I was doing a cohort with a group of pastors, and they were all pretty like, it's kind of mid-sized, small-sized rural churches, things like that. And it was interesting. I did when I did this part of our work together, when we're talking about integration, holding positive and negative, I had them do what is called a loss inventory. And so let's look at the top 10 losses that you've experienced in your life. Let's process them together, right? This is something I'm trained to do. This is that was part of the cohort. So they wrote out top 10. Number 1 was the hardest down to 10, was the least difficult in the top 10, right? So I had them start from 10 all the way to 1. And it was really interesting. All 10 all the way up to number 6 to maybe 5 were all things that happened in ministry. So we tried to plant, and our plans didn't work out, or we were close to this couple and now we're not, and that couple left the church, or I was misunderstood, I was misrepresented, I experienced betrayal, I was let go, all these different things, right? 10 all the way up to 6. Interestingly enough, every single one of the pastors, either 4-1 or 3-1 of the most difficult were things that happened in their family of origin. Something that happened when they were younger, something that took place. So there was one pastor particularly had his father passed. It was his number 1 loss. His father passed when he was young. And the way that he learned how to deal with that loss, which is he was the older sibling. He was to take care of everyone else. He was to take care of his mom, his siblings, and make sure everything was taken care of. The way that he dealt with number 1 was exactly the way that he dealt with all the hurt in ministry, the betrayal in ministry. What did my kids need? What does my wife need? What does the church need? And not thinking about what does he need.
Yeah.
And so he had a template of how he would deal with negative things that he brought into ministry.
Right.
I think with so many pastors and leaders, that happens, honestly, at a staggering rate. Like, what's your template of how you integrate negative and positive? And whatever you learned probably as a young child is probably what you're going to bring in, unless you learn how to heal and grow and learn how to grieve well and learn how to celebrate good things too.
Yeah, that's good. So it's almost, it's something you learned, but it's like, man, we don't need to leave that as a frozen, static way that we always respond.
Exactly.
That we can kind of reevaluate how do we look at things that are hard. And I'm kind of a grief evangelist. Like, I just think it's so important as far as growth. Like, helping leaders grow is helping them understand negative realities and positive reality. Like, how do you live in both? And I think there's so much scripture about it, right? I mean, there's 1/3 of the Psalms are about mourning, lament. You have a book on grief called Lamentations. Jesus is called the man of sorrows. Like, it is important to, and in times in Israel's history, God would put his people through times of lament. And I think it's important to look for the future and be excited about Christ's coming, his resurrection, but also there's a time to say, there are things that impacted me right now. I mean, this last week, it is sad, the things that we've seen in our country. And it is important to say, I feel kind of sad about that. And sometimes we can be like those first, like, how do we shepherd the church through hard times in our country and our nation? But how are we doing? How am I feeling about this? Have I grieved these things? Right.
So I think that's so important.
It's good, Ben. Man, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
We're going to leave it there. Hey, guys, if you have not yet signed up for our Facebook group, it's a private Facebook group where we just talk about all things growing and going. We have a lot of people posting there, and if you got questions or if you got just things that you want to pop in, chime in on, little teachings, that kind of stuff. So make sure you sign up for that. Thanks.